Welcome to all of you attending today's webinar facilitated by ICAHD UK. On the run-up to COP26, we turn our attention to supporting the call for climate justice, not ethnic cleansing, which was put out by Stop the JNF, one of our partners that we have worked with closely for the last couple of years. Our work dovetails because we are each political organizations that address Israel's settler colonial policies that is resulting in the forcible displacement of the indigenous Palestinian population to move in a Jewish population from other countries. Stop the JNF has a focus on the Jewish National Fund, which is the Zionist agency that for the last 120 years plus has played a key role in the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Israel has developed an extensive network of illegal settlements across Palestine, superimposing Western communities and their complex infrastructure and industries on the ancient landscape. This has devastated the natural environment and the communities of the indigenous people, destroying their sources of livelihood, which have evolved over millennia in tune with the natural environment. Israel's authorities have uprooted over 1 million fruit and olive trees and destroyed ancient terraces. In addition to Israeli authorities demolishing Palestinian homes and structures vital for living, which now number more than 130,000 structures on both sides of the Green Line since 1948, it also destroys water cisterns, irrigation systems, and solar panels. Palestinians residing in both the occupied Palestine territory and within the state of Israel are denied control over their land, water, and energy sources. And many know firsthand what climate crisis means. However, the JNF now seeks to greenwash its crimes as a participant in the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. So during this webinar, we're going to learn much more about climate apartheid in Palestine and the reason to call to keep the JNF out of COP26. And lastly, you will discover how you can play a part to support Palestinians in COP26. So I'm now ready to call upon our main speaker, who is Eurig Scandrett. Eurig is a lecturer in sociology and is the coordinator of postgraduate programs in social justice at Queen Margaret University, Scotland. He's the former head of community action of Friends of the Earth in Scotland. He's chair of Scottish PSC. He's on the steering committee for Stop the JNF. And he is also someone who has spent time on the ground in Palestine, and with two others jointly wrote the groundbreaking report, Environmental Nakba. It's not surprising to know that Eurig is involved in preparations for COP26. So Eurig, welcome. And now over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and it's lovely to be here and to speak to ICAHD's meeting. There's a couple of names that are familiar here, so it's great to see them, and also a lot of people who I don't know. So I'm aware that this is a group, ICAHD is a group that has been supporting resistance to settler colonialism and the destruction of houses and buildings and the evictions of Palestinians for many years. So I'm aware that I'm speaking to a group with a lot of knowledge. Hopefully I can share some of my knowledge with you as well. And if all goes well, Mahmoud as well will be sharing something. Mahmoud is a good friend. I've stayed with Mahmoud in his village of Al Masra in the district of Bethlehem. And I know that this is an important and busy time of year for Palestinian activists who go to where the where the farmers are harvesting their olive crops, and the activists go there because when Palestinians try to harvest their olive crops, they are invariably attacked by settlers, harassed by settlers, and the Israeli military will then intervene on the side of the settlers rather than on the side of the Palestinians. So the non-violent activists such as Mahmoud make a presence there, confront the settlers non-violently, and so it is a busy and difficult time, and it can be quite unpredictable. But let's hope that all is well and he's on his way back and will be able to join us. If not, then we'll try and fill in some of the material that he might have talked about. So, okay, my name's Eurig Scandrett, as Linda said, and I'm involved with Stop the JNF UK and chair of Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. What I'm going to be talking about is I have some slides. We can deviate from the slides as well when we get to the question and answer. So if there's other aspects of the environmental Nakba, which is, as Linda said, that was a report from Friends of the Earth International, which I was part of the ongoing environmental destruction of Palestinian land, water, pollution, waste, etc. All the various environmental crimes associated with the Israeli occupation, which are designed to drive Palestinians from their homes. So that's why we called it environmental Nakba. So we can talk a bit about that as well. But I want to particularly focus, as Linda said, on Stop the JNF and COP26. The Conference of Parties to the Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is happening in Glasgow. So if you bear with me a second, I'm going to share my screen where I have some slides. And perhaps you could indicate that that's visible.
That's great. We can see it, Eurig.
Always, yeah, it's. I can't see it yet. It always takes a second here. I can see it as well now. Right. Okay, and I'm sure that you'll interrupt me if something goes wrong with the technology. Okay. Stop the JNF is an organization. It's a coalition of Palestine Solidarity Campaign, several Palestine Solidarity Campaign groups, Sheffield and Manchester and so on, the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. And we work closely with a number of organizations, including ICAHD, and we're regularly meeting with Linda in support of that. There are Stop the JNF groups in many different countries, and we collaborate with them as well, South Africa, Canada, etc. So that's who we are. And we have been mobilizing towards the COP26 in Glasgow for over a year. Of course, at one time COP26 was going to be a year ago in November 2020. It was postponed for a year. There have actually been calls for it to be postponed again because of the inaccessibility of the summit, particularly from people from the global south. And it's probably worth noting here that we were planning for a number of Palestinian colleagues to be in Glasgow for the COP26, but that is not possible because the UK government requires anybody who has a double vaccination certificate from the Palestinian Authority to quarantine for 10 days. Whereas if you have a double vaccination certificate from the Israeli Authority, you do not need to quarantine at all. So the UK government is replicating the apartheid regime of Israel. Anyway, so Palestinians won't be with us, but we will be active in COP26. So Stop the JNF, you can access our website, stopthejnf.org. We're focusing very much on COP26 at the moment, but we've been going for quite a number of years and have been active in various ways. One of the things that we've been focusing on is the JNF UK, JNF Charitable Trust UK, which is a charity, as I'm sure you're aware, in the UK. We've been seeking to try and get the charitable status of JNF UK removed on the several bases, not least of which because its sole purpose is, of course, ethnic cleansing. It was set up for ethnic cleansing. It was set up to take land from Palestinians, evict the Palestinians, and replace with Jewish settlers. And so that is not a charitable cause. So far, we've not been successful in removing the charitable status, but we're keeping on pursuing that. There's also a charity in Scotland called KKL Scotland, and we're also pursuing a similar line there about the non-charitable objectives of the organization. But we're focusing here on the COP26. If you look at the website for the JNF in Israel, then it's very clear. This is the clicking on KKL JNF ID, the way that they want to portray themselves, their identity. It's very clear that they want to portray themselves as an environmental organization. I just highlighted that a little bit, that it's Israel's largest green organization and the oldest green organization in the world. It advances water management, forestry and environment, etc., etc. Well, I will be saying a little bit more about the extent to which that claim that it is at all a green organization is in fact true or reliable. Even if it were a green organization, it certainly wouldn't be the oldest in the world. Various organizations such as the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, it was founded before 1901 when the JNF was, but let's leave that aside. I want to focus on the fact that it actually isn't a green organization. COP26 in Glasgow, as you will know, it's the Conference of Parties, 26th Conference of Parties of the Framework Convention on Climate Change under the auspices of the United Nations. The UK has the chair this year and jointly with Italy, there will be the parties to the Framework Convention are the countries who have signed up to it. They will be gathering, their representatives will be gathering in Glasgow to negotiate some kind of agreement with a view to implementing the Paris Agreement, the 2015 Paris Agreement, in which the world committed to actions to maintain, to keep global warming to within 1.5 degrees Celsius of the pre-industrial levels. It's being done through the nationally determined contribution, so each individual country will bring its contribution to the table, and they will negotiate how they're going to coordinate that and to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report in June this year was quite alarming, saying that the world was on course to miss that 1.5 degrees C target. It's more likely to be over 3 degrees Celsius, which would cause uncontrollable climate change. So there's a lot of pressure on the governments to actually make much more rapid action for climate change. the climate justice movement, the civil society organizations that have mobilized around it, particularly around the COP26 coalition, which brings together environmentalists, social justice organizations, trade unions, international global development movements, solidarity movements, etc. I have been focusing on climate justice. So the argument is that you cannot solve climate change by continuing with the same economic strategy which both damages the environment and damages the poor. It's purely to the benefit of the rich countries and the rich within all countries. So climate justice is the narrative that civil society is pressing on the parties, and there will be a number of demonstrations which I'll come to later. My PowerPoint seems to have jammed. That's not a good sign. I might have to come out of this. Ah, okay, this seems to be working. The JNF has
Eurig, could I just say that it's still the first slide that I'm seeing on my screen. I don't know what it's like for other people. Could we just have a quick check as to which slide we are supposed to be looking at?
We're actually on the fourth slide, so maybe it's not working. Let me just try clicking on that.
Yes, I can see a message from Hillary and Philip also saying that they're not seeing the show. Now it's changed for me. I hope it's changed for others.
Okay, well, what you've missed is the stopthejnf.org website, and the ID of the JNF in Israel, claiming to be the largest green organization in the world. So that's where sorry about that. Thank you for.
Okay, it's fine now. Thank you. We'll
and so we're talking about COP26 in Glasgow. The JNF has observer status with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. A number of non-government organizations and intergovernmental organizations are entitled to apply for observer status. There are several hundred of these, which means that they are allowed into the inner zones of the negotiations. So there's a security cordon inevitably at these things. Anyone who doesn't have a badge to go in is not permitted to go in. The parties, the representatives of the governments are allowed, but also so are those with observer status. So so the JNF has observer status. Its website says that the delegations participate annually in the UN Climate Change Conference, holding lectures and sharing information with partners worldwide. They participate as part of the Israeli delegation, so they accompany the Israeli delegation. And in past COPs, they have done things like held fringe meetings, had a stall, essentially promoting JNF and Israel as world leaders in tackling climate change, and the JNF being the kind of environmental wing of Israel, and that's how they promote themselves. So there's very much a kind of an ideological role of presenting Israel as a kind of a positive player in the whole story of tackling climate change. It is expected the JNF is expected to participate in Glasgow. We haven't found out what they're planning to do yet. They don't seem to put things on their websites in advance anymore. The previous COPs, there have been demonstrations against their participation, but we are aware that they are planning to be there. The Stop the JNF coalition has put together, in conjunction with the Palestinian COP26 coalition, a declaration of civil society organizations, individuals and organizations, to keep the JNF out of COP26, and there'll be a link to this, which will invite you to sign it a little bit later. It's a declaration that which explains why an organization that is set up for ethnic cleansing should not be welcomed in the Conference of Parties. It's fair to say that the United Nations has control over who has observer status and who hasn't. So it would be a difficult process to get the United Nations actually to evict the JNF, but certainly if the non-government organizations that have observer status are aware of the nature of JNF, they will be able to run them, they will be able to ask them difficult questions, and they will make them feel very unwelcome at the COP. So where did the JNF's environmentalism come from? I've put together a few slides of the imagery that the JNF itself has used over its own history. This is a poster from 1929 for its tree fund. From its early days, it used tree planting as a means to primarily raise funds throughout the world for its project of colonizing Palestine, and so even in the early days of the British mandate, this is what it was doing, using imagery like this, which was, you know, a rural idyll, so quite a romantic picture, which of tree planting in Palestine. But also its early days, it used a number of other kinds of imagery. In this poster here from 1935 demonstrates a very different kind of portrayal of you know, of actually environmental alteration, you would say damage in these days, bulldozers, explosions, building roads, completely changing the environment and to modern sensibilities, not at all environmentalist at all. By 1947, I mean, it was still portraying itself as essentially a Zionist settler colonial project. These are translations. If there are Hebrew readers here, then please correct me if any of this is wrong. I'm relying on others' translations. I don't read Hebrew, but basically the organization was portraying itself as at the forefront of settler colonization, and in 1948, the JNF portraying itself, publicizing itself as being an active supporter of the Zionist militias in driving Palestinians from their homes by military means. More recently, 1962, starting to see a little bit more kind of green imagery coming in, using the sort of the leaf there. But if you read the small print, what does the Jewish National Fund do in Israel? It plants forests, it prepares the soil, it also drains swamps, it builds roads through mountains and deserts, and gives land and employment to new immigrants. So a bit more portraying itself as environmental, but in the context of a number of things which are not environmental. Then by 1980, much more of a kind of presenting itself as an environmental organization. Nothing protects the environment like peace. So if you like, the organization has come to its environmentalism fairly late on in its development, and has obviously realized its the ideological value of portraying itself as an environmental organization. If we actually look at the environmental record of the JNF, excuse me, it's a little bit less benign. Probably the most environmentally destructive thing that it was involved with is the draining of the Hula wetlands in the 1950s and 60s in northern Israel. which led to the extinction of 5 aquatic plant species, 2 fish species, and it was believed to have also caused the extinction of the hula painted frog, also known as the Palestinian painted frog, although that was subsequently rediscovered to have not quite been extinct. It was pushed very close to extinction through this draining. It also led to a lot of ecological, hydrological and geological damage. The hula wetlands were an important staging post for migratory birds, which when they were drained, that was disrupted. The hula has now been, some of it has been partially reconstituted. So they've built some lakes in the wetlands. So there's been some return of the migratory birds, and they've put it actually and turned it into a nature reserve, and are portraying themselves now as environmentally beneficial by having this nature reserve for the birds, having destroyed what was originally there. The forest planting is probably best known for the Judaism of the environment, making it look like Central Europe, a bit more like Central Europe and less Arabic. Planting non-native species in inappropriate ecological locations, and also planting some native species, but in ecosystems that are not from where they come. So what the Aleppo pine, Pinus halapensis, which the Israelis have renamed the Jerusalem pine. It is native, but it grows in very sparse hilltop, shallow soil locations. Whereas JNF have been planting it in dense monocultures, forestry, as if it were a forestry tree. So there's a lot of environmentally damaging activities that it's been involved with. It was involved in setting up Mekorot, the water company, and the production of the national water carrier, which transported water from the Lake Galilee through to the Negev or Aqab desert and to central Israel to divert the water from the River Jordan into these other locations. It's led to the reduction of the water flow in the River Jordan to only 4% of the level of flow that was there in the mandate period, with all the ecological destruction that's gone along with that. And in the Negev or the Aqab, where the desert, where it's the planting forests at the moment, destroying the kind of fragile agroecosystems that the Bedouin have sustained for many hundreds of years, and in their attempts to drive the Bedouin from the lands, they've at various times used toxic chemicals and the notorious green patrols, with the use of violence against both the Bedouin people and their crops and animals. So it doesn't have a very good environmental record, and so its claims to be an environmental organization is thin at the very least. But even if it got its act together and it's improved its environmental record, which it claims to be trying to do, that would not really be the main point, because it still exists for the purposes of ethnic cleansing. So that's why we in Stop the JNF have been mobilizing around COP26, Stop the JNF. So this is the graphics that we're using. We're hoping that others will pick up and use these graphics. There will be events up and down Britain and elsewhere. We're preparing for the COP, protests, school strikes, vigils, but also if you're not involved in any of these, it's possible to download these these images from the website and just put them out in the window, or to use them in various other ways. So a coordinated imagery is one way that we're trying to do this, drawing attention to the demand of civil society for climate justice at the COP, but contrasting that with the ethnic cleansing purpose of the Jewish National Fund. What kind of things can be done at the top of COP26? Well, there is a global day of action for climate justice. I forgot to put the date on that. 6th of November. 6th of November, the Saturday right in the middle of the COP. There is a global day of action for climate justice, which has been called by COP26 Coalition, and there will be a Palestine solidarity block at least some of these in Kelvin Grove in Glasgow. That's where there's a big march in Glasgow itself, gathering in Kelvin Grove, and the Palestine bloc will gather there in Kelvin Grove Park. At London, the Palestine bloc is meeting at the Monument Tube Station. So go there if you can attend the London climate justice march. There are also local hubs, smaller events, vigils, protests, rallies, etc., around Britain and and further afield around the world. So if you look at the COP26 coalition.org, that will tell you where the nearest hub to you is, and there are plans for having Palestine blocks in that as well. There's also be a People's Summit for Climate Justice. That's from the 7th to the 10th of November, immediately after the Day of Action. And we stopped the JNF in conjunction with the Palestinian colleagues, the COP26 coalition in Palestine, will be holding an event called How Apartheid Israel and the Climate Crisis Are Intertwined. Palestine COP26 coalition, should say, is made up of Friends of the Earth Palestine, Stop the Wall, the Popular Struggle Coordinating Committee, the Palestine Farmers Union, and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. They've come together to coordinate the activities around COP26 in the West Bank. We're working with the Gastivists Collective, the campaigning against gas pipelines and gas infrastructure, and Stop the JNF, and particularly focusing that event on the JNF and the Eastern Mediterranean gas pipeline, which ties Israel into an alliance of climate change, of fossil fuel exporting from gas that has been stolen from the Palestinians in the Mediterranean by the Israeli occupation, and then pumping it into Europe, tying apartheid Israel into European European fuel sovereignty, but also making that connection with the JNF as an ethnic cleansing implementation of apartheid Israel. Other activities that are going on, that's the petition, the link to the petition, keep the JNF out of COP26. We're looking for more signatures for that. We will want to make that point at the COP26 itself, but also beyond COP26, because they will continue to want to come to COPs in the future. Please do sign that. Some other initiatives, Planetry in Palestine. This is a project that was started a few years ago, but is being relaunched with the COP26, and that is as we as I said earlier about what Mahmoud is doing in terms of the olive planting, what the non-violent activists in the West Bank are doing is standing alongside the farmers as they pick their olives, but also this from the olive picking season that then moves into the olive tree planting season. And so this is about raising funds within Britain and elsewhere to support the initiative, where Palestinian activists, Israeli solidarity activists, and when people can get there, international solidarity activists will support farmers in planting trees. And of course, planting trees sounds like a fairly apolitical activity, but actually planting trees right up against where the settlers are, knowing that settlers will come and harass the Palestinians, knowing that the military will be harassing them, knowing that the trees, there's a fair chance that a lot of the trees that get planted will get ripped out, uprooted, burned, poisoned by the settlers, and so they just keep coming back to keep on planting trees. The sumud that Palestinians are known for, and refusing to give up, keeping on planting a tree. So it's a way which we in Britain can provide solidarity in a fairly straightforward way, but it's also a way of us realizing just what that means to plant a tree in Palestine. The other project that's connected to this is it's a fairly new project, and it's in the early days of being developed. It's the Forests and Parks project, in which connections are being made between Palestinian refugees from villages that were depopulated and destroyed in 1948 or 1967, and the global community acting in solidarity, so that the forests and the parks that are named after particular countries or particular themes or particular people can be used to mobilize international community against the JNF. So, for example, British Park, there is was built on the village of Ajar. We are in touch with refugees from Ajar whose grandparents were forcibly evicted, and they are telling the story about how the money raised in Britain has been used to maintain the refugee status and prevent them from returning to their homes. The Coretta Scott King forest that the Martin Luther King's wife was named after her, is being used to mobilize anti-racist activists against the JNF. The outrage that a racist organization is naming a forest planted on top of a destroyed Palestinian village in the name of a famous anti-racist campaigner. And there's the Balfour Forest as well, which of course is named after Balfour, Arthur Balfour, who signed the Balfour Declaration, and of course is from Scotland. He actually was born and grew up about 10 miles from where I am now. So using that forest, again, planted on top of Palestinian villages to raise awareness in Scotland of the crimes of the JNF. So that's the slides. And happy to open up. I'm not sure how I've been keeping to time, probably very badly, but Linda has been too polite to to intervene.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Eurig. I would like to just bring up a few things that I've seen in the chat line for you, and then we'll see if we can then go into the film. A couple of things, yeah, regarding COP26, please. can you provide a little bit more clarity on green zones versus the blue zones, explaining the difference in that? Then we have put in the chat line the website for COP26, the information that there on the events. Also, I think Stop the JNF also has events on its website, so that's another one to check on. That's more specific though to Palestine ones. Certainly the Palestine ones we will have on the ICAHD UK website as well. So I hope everyone can see what is in the chat line. So if you would start talking about the green zone versus the blue zone, and then we've seen also in the chat line news that there is going to be an RMT union rail strike during COP26. So if you could comment on that as well, please. So Eurig, back to you, please.
Thank you very much. I can't say very much about the green zones and the blue zones. I'm afraid that's something that I'm not familiar with. Certainly there are zones, there will be zones that only the parties and their entourage, the government representatives can get to. There will be zones that the observers can get to, and there will be the outer part that the ordinary people like us can get to. So I'm afraid I can't give you too much detail on that. And I mean, partly it's my ignorance, but there's also I do hear from people who are doing the kind of detailed negotiating, and their frustration is that the actual details of where these zones will lie are still not clear, that the UK government has not been entirely forthcoming with its information, that there hasn't been very much openness, and there's been a lot of frustration even amongst those who are close to that, the organizing process. So I'm afraid I can't give much information, partly because I don't know, but partly because I think nobody knows. Where you can get to it will be the demonstrations. I mean, in Glasgow it will be Kelvin Grove marching up to George Square, which will be close to where the negotiations will be, and from there it will be going on to Glasgow Green. So if you know Glasgow, that's going to be the route of the march. The London march will be starting from the Bank of England and going to, I think, Trafalgar Square, but that's probably as far as I know. COP26coalition.org is the source for the civil society mobilizing. Yeah, okay, there we are. Thank you, Malcolm. You've clarified some of these the green zone and the blue zone issues. So yeah, so the blue zone is obviously what I was talking about, where the parties have access. The green zone is where civil society also has some access. So there we go.
And we can sign up to have access to some of the meetings online, correct?
Correct. In terms of, I mean, I can speak for I can't speak for, but I can speak from being involved with the COP26 coalition, which is the big mobilization around civil society. And the People's Summit that will be from the 7th to the 10th of November will be a mixture of in-person, online, and hybrid events. So, for example, the event that we are running with the Palestine COP26 coalition and the Gastavists collective, that is being planned as a hybrid event. I had a meeting yesterday morning with Manal and others involved with that, where we were trying to work out how we were going to do that. But you really appreciate that a lot of these things are being arrangements are being changed quite close to the bone, because knowledge is not is not there. We only fairly recently found out about the fact that the Palestinians were not able to be there, so having to make alternative arrangements for that. Things will be changing right up to the last minute, I'm sure. In terms of the RMT strike, yes, the RMT have called a strike for the COP, the period of time when the COP26 is on. I was on a meeting with the COP26 Coalition Trade Union Caucus recently, and there were people from the RMT there, and drawing attention to the fact that there are a number of issues, that there have been ongoing disputes between the RMT members and the rail owners, particularly concerning the cuts in the staffing levels, levels of length of shifts, break times, various things that's been ongoing for a while. And they're making the point that actually public transport is exactly the kind of thing that the country should be investing in, if it is going to do anything reasonable about climate change. So that is so they said, well, okay, let's take industrial action, or let's take industrial action during the COP. So accessing the Glasgow, if you have to travel, will unless the pressure of the industrial action actually means that the rail companies will concede to the demands of the union, access will be a bit more difficult, and you'll probably have to get by bus or by or by private transport. It's interesting that the stagecoach that also had a dispute, although the threat of striking near to the COP seems to have meant that the dispute has been resolved to the satisfaction of the unions, and the strikes have been called off. So as of a meeting yesterday, you can get there by bus. We don't know yet whether the strike will go ahead of the RMT, but at the moment it has been called. So expect to travel by other means if you need to travel. I also drew attention to the hubs. There are many hubs there, so there'll be if you can't get to Glasgow or London, there will also be events nearer to yourselves. The coalition recognizes that many people will not want to travel on public transport during the pandemic anyway. They may not want to travel at all during the pandemic. So having events nearer to where people live is an important part, and it's not a second best. It's an important part of the demonstrations, and it's important from our point of view to have Palestine Solidarity supporters on those as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Eurig. So let's all look out for more news. We'll check out the websites. We'll certainly post links on the ICAHD UK website, and I know Stop the JNF will as well, as we hope to enable you to play a part in supporting the Palestinian bloc at COP26. Now, I think in our last few minutes, we should show this brand new film. I think we one of the first groups to even see it. Eurig, you can tell us.
Yeah, well, I think this is the third time it's been shown to small groups. So yes, it's not been widely released, but this is a film that was made by Manal, who was originally going to be able to speak here, but unfortunately has not been able to. She made this for a previous workshop. So let me see now. I have to. Shall I go ahead just now, Linda?
Well, what I'd say is we'll show the film now, and then I just have some closing remarks. So I hope you can all stay with us for this film, which is about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then
15.
the final closing remarks. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Over to you now.
The JNF stands for the Jewish National Fund, and my understanding of it is that it is an organization that claims to be supportive of the Jewish people, which I don't have a problem with. But in historic Palestine, the JNF helped in establishing settlements, in dispossession of Palestinians from their original villages, in destroying infrastructure, and from its establishment until today, the JNF has had a great role in the colonization project of Palestine. One of the methods that Israel used to prevent Palestinians from returning to their lands was to destroy any traces that they lived there once. However, those who would visit Ajur today as a park where Israelis can enjoy walking around, if they look closely, they would still see the traces of people's houses. They would still see the cactus trees that marked the borders of people's lands. If you're really interested in looking, you would see that there were people who were there once.
عن ممارسات الصندوق القومي اليهودي في ديار بئر سبع جنوب فلسطين في كل قضية التطهير العرقي وسلب الأراضي من البدو الفلسطينيين. الصندوق القومي اليهودي في النقب بيعتمد على أشياء اثنين أو على بندين في التطهير العرقي وتهجير البدو من أراضيهم. الأول هو إنه بحجة إنه الصندوق القومي اليهودي يحول الصحراء إلى خضراء، وهذه الدعاية اللي ماشي فيها في العالم كله، وبروج لحاله إن بحول الصحراء لخضراء والحفاظ على البيئة ومواجهة الاحتباس الحراري والتصحر اللي قاعد بيصير في العالم. ولكن إذا بنطلع أو بنقرأ الأبحاث اللي صارت عن نوعية الأشجار اللي الصندوق القومي اليهودي بيزرعها في فلسطين بشكل عام وفي ديار بئر سبع بشكل خاص، هي أشجار لا تمت بصلة للبيئة الصحراوية، وزائد إنها هي أشجار أصلا أشجار غازية واللي ما بتعيش في البيئة الصحراوية، واللي بتموت بعد فترة، مما يؤثر على البيئة بشكل أكثر من لأنها بتطلق غاز الكربون في الجو، مما يزيد الاحتباس الحراري في فلسطين. هذه واحدة من الممارسات طبعا، وبحجة حماية البيئة بتصير كثير بحولوها لشيء يسمى الدوريات الخضراء اللي هي لحماية البيئة، ولكن هي فعليا دوريات سوداء بتحاول تحد من توسع البدو في أراضيهم أو مزروعاتهم اللي بيزرعوها وهم بيخربوها في فترة حصادها. البند الثاني اللي بيستعمل الصندوق القومي اليهودي في ديار بئر السبع جنوب فلسطين هي بند الغزاة. الغزاة بما معناه انه احنا البدو غزاة في هذه الأراضي، والصندوق القومي اليهودي بمساعدة دائرة أراضي إسرائيل بحاولوا يستردوا هذه الأراضي منا احنا البدو بما ان احنا غزاة. بس فعليا قانونيا ما في ولا أي شيء بيصدق هذا الكلام. كل مخططاتهم بتصير طبعا بشكل فجأة بدون ما يخبروا الناس عن أي شيء ودهم يسووه، وبقوموا أول شيء بيجيبوا جرافاتهم بمساعدة طبعا شرطة الاحتلال ومساعدة في هذه الأراضي، والصندوق القومي اليهودي بمساعدة دائرة أراضي إسرائيل بحاولوا يستردوا هذه الأراضي منا احنا البدو بما ان احنا غزاة. بس فعليا قانونيا ما في ولا أي شيء بيصدق هذا الكلام. كل مخططاتهم بتصير طبعا بشكل فجأة بدون ما يخبروا الناس عن أي شيء ودهم يسووه. وبقوموا أول شيء بيجيبوا جرافاتهم بمساعدة طبعا شرطة الاحتلال ومساعدة دائرة أراضي إسرائيل. بيدخلوا على الأرض بشكل فجائي وبيبدأوا يسووا في الأرض عشان يحضروها للتحريش. طبعا كل هذه الأشياء الصندوق القومي اليهودي بيشتغلها لفرض حقائق على أرض الواقع بدون أي وجه حق. وأكبر مثال موجود عندنا هي قرية العراقيب اللي صارت مهدومة أكثر من 184 مرة بسبب أنهم يقوموا بتحريش المنطقة الموجودة فيها قرية العراقيب. حديثا كل الصندوق القومي اليهودي ناوي يحرش أو يزرع أشجار في
رمز كسية من بيت جالة، سكان بيت جالة. طبعا أنا في الأرض تبعتي، الأرض هذه ورثتها عن رحمة أبوي، أرض مزارعة معي ومعي إخراج كيت فيها من عصيون. فالأرض هذه بنيت فيها بيت 160 متر مربع، وكان عندي مطعم هدوا لي اليهود بحجة أنه في منظمة يهودية الصندوق القومي اليهودي بيدعوا أن وفي شركة منوتة إسرائيلية يعني من ضمن الشركة هذه، من ضمن الصندوق هذا، بدعوا أن لهم في بيننا محاكم. أنا معي إخراج كيد ومعي ثبوتات، هم ما معهم ولا قصقوصة ورق، هم لو معهم إثباتات رسمية خلال 24 ساعة بيمسكوني بيستوني برا. عمالهم بذايكوني، صاروا هدين لي 11 مرة، مجرفين الأرض، مش مخلين لي أعيش. بصراحة أنا عيلتي ومرتي عايشين الحين في خيمة زي ما تقول عايش على حدود سوريا، زي لاجئي سوريا المساكين. بس أنا في بلدي في 2021 ما حدا سأل عني. مناطق زي هذه أرضي وبظل فيها للممات. حتى لو بيجي زيارة عندي أنا، شوف الوضع كيف حطوا مستوطن جنبي هنا. المستوطن لا يملك نهائيا أي ورق ولا إثباتات، قاعد بسبة الأرض اللي أنا قاعد فيها أنا. إذا ربح القضية في أرضي بربح قطعتين أرض معهن، إذا خسر بخسر الثنتين، هو خسران. ديمة أنا موجود هو خسران وكلهم خسرانين. نشكر الله.
My name is Michael Kalmanovitz. I'm a member of IJAN, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and Stop the JNF, here in the UK. I'm from an Orthodox Jewish family. When I was 13, as a bar mitzvah present, I was given JNF trees, which is one way that the JNF fundraises. The JNF's constitution states that the land it controls is for Jewish people only. In other words, the JNF practices apartheid, and stealing Palestinian land is clearly not charitable. The Stop the JNF campaign is trying to change the political climate so that when people hear the name JNF, they don't think environmental charity, they think ethnic cleansing. For over a decade, we have disrupted their fundraising events, especially their fundraising golf tournaments, which they have had to cancel in Scotland. Stop the JNF has organised a great series of webinars with such luminaries as Salman Abu Sita and Richard Falk. We have made 2 legal submissions to the Charity Commission to demand that the JNF UK lose its charitable status. The JNF's British Park was built on the ruins of the village of Ajor. Khalud al-Ajama, whose family had legal rights there, was outrageously told that they had no right to question the status of the JNF. We petitioned the Attorney General to reverse that decision and protested outside their offices. And in a separate action, we petitioned the fundraising regulator. We encourage members of Parliament to submit early day motions calling for the charitable status of the JNF to be investigated, which were endorsed by over 70 MPs, which is fantastic in today's political climate where support for Palestine is almost automatically deemed anti-Semitic. There is a great Jewish working class tradition that is anti-Zionist and fits very well with the Stop the JNF campaign, which is part of the Palestinian-led boycott movement, which is one of the great anti-racist movements of our time.
Of Stop the JNF UK, and one of the campaigns that we built was around a young Palestinian refugee, Khaloud al-Ajama, whose family were ethnically cleansed in 1948 and whose lands in Ajur now lie under JNF UK's British Park. The family still has its title deeds of ownership, a tax receipt stamped by the British Mandatory Authority, plus proof of purchase of an additional olive grove. They had quite a bit of land, and Ajur was a thriving centre of agriculture and a regional marketplace, alive and buzzing until 1948. Khaloud and her family now live in Ida refugee camp, Bethlehem, not far from Ajur. Until recently, her grandmother, Fatima, was alive, and like many of that Nakba generation, she kept the memory of Ajur living on and instilled into the generations that followed her their right of return. So we took this case to the Charity Commission, seeking to remove the JNF UK from the Register of Charities, with Khaloud at the heart of the case, but also referencing JNF UK's work in the Nakab and its links with the IDF. Obviously, we're not naive. This has been done before. The establishment closes ranks, and you may get nowhere in terms of the objective of having the JNF struck off. But that's why the official challenge isn't the central element, it's the organising core. So we built towards the case, using it to spread the word. The case was rejected. We sought an appeal and got a hearing in court. And a day in court is a great focus for a protest. The judge didn't grant the appeal because he said Khaloud didn't have standing. In lay people's terms, that means the right to push for an appeal. She has proof of ownership of a huge plot taken by the JNF UK, converted and handed over like a gift to the state that expelled the rightful owners in the first place in 1948, but she doesn't have standing to challenge. And we still use that unjust verdict. Our next step was a speaking tour with Khaloud, and that was very effective. And after that, we took the case to the Attorney General, who is the government's legal authority and the only office holder who has the power to compel the Charity Commission to investigate further. 4,000 people signed letters, which we handed over on the International Day of Solidarity to his office. He didn't budge, but we got 4,000 people joining the case, and we learnt a lot for the future. Also, we do have a lasting product, an artefact, which has multiple uses. Luckily for us, Khaloud is a filmmaker as well as an activist and an academic, and she produced a film called On the Way Home, featuring Fatima, her grandma, contrasting Ida camp with shots of their real home in Ajur, and wonderful comments from Fatima about home. It's a short, emotionally and politically very powerful film, asserting the right of return and challenging the JNF. So the point I'm making is, use the official channels, but be under no illusions about the establishment. Use the channels to build support, to build a case, and to discredit the JNF UK, the JNF, full stop, simply by revealing what it is, what it's done, and what it's still doing today.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Eurig, for showing us this new film, giving us more insight and understanding to what the JNF is doing and how Stop the JNF is working to counter it. So again, if anybody hasn't signed the statement yet to get the JNF out of COP26, make sure you do that. A little bit of information I can give you now is that once the study tours resume again, once COVID is allows us to have international travel, our study tours will include a stop at British Park, so that we can see that. We go to Ida Camp, we'll also be going to British Park as well. This is all part of equipping the participants for campaigning back here. I would like to say that our next webinar is going to be on the 17th of November. The start time is going to be 6 o'clock, slightly later than usual. And it is going to be led by Dr. Monica Husterman, who is the chair of ICAHD UK. And during that webinar, we are going to be bringing in some of our partners for updates on the campaigns that we work closely with them on. So Stop the JNF will be amongst us again for that webinar. We'll have Protecting Palestinian Families, Corporate Occupation, the UK Palestine Mental Health Network as well. So, as I said, come along and hear news of how our campaigns are building, how we're working together in support of one another. Soon information about that webinar will be found on the ICAHD website, and it will go out in our communications. Yes, you can check our website for more details on all of our campaigns, and also the section that we have on the One Democratic State campaign. At present, we have launched a crowdfunding initiative to raise money for the translation of Jeff Helper's latest book, Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, The Case for One Democratic Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, Zionism, Settler Colonialism, and the Case for One Democratic State. So again, that's raising money to translate the English edition into Arabic to really get it into Palestine and the Arab world. Lastly, we do encourage you to join ICAHD UK. If you're not already a member, we are very much about equipping people for campaigning to help bring freedom, justice, and equality for those who live between the river and the sea. Sign up for the actions you can take bulletin, our monthly newsletters that come out also through the ICAHD website. You can sign up to get the communications sent out by ICAHD USA. Again, ICAHD UK is not a charity, so we are very dependent on people like you for supporting us, enabling our work to continue, building our movement to help change history. Well, now I'd like to give a final thank you to Eurig Scandrett for speaking to us today, for the many insights he's given us, the clarity he's brought, and for mobilizing as we go up to COP26 and all that will happen then. Thank you all for joining us, attending this webinar, as we remember the environmental struggles are an integral part of the struggle for freedom and justice in Palestine, as well as elsewhere. Thank you again. We look forward to you joining us again at our future events. Goodbye. Thank you.